He publicly humiliated me in my own home, at my own 70th birthday party, serving me divorce papers for his new girlfriend. He thought my age made me weak. He didn't know I was about to auction off his entire world while he planned his wedding. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. I never expected my 70th birthday to be the day my marriage died in front of a crowd. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the air holds the first real promise of winter. I had spent weeks planning that party, meticulously overseeing every detail, even though I told everyone who asked that I wanted something low-key. I knew better. If I didn't plan it with the precision of a military campaign my husband Charles would have. And I wasn't about to let him slap some wilted streamers on a buffet table, order a sheet cake from the grocery store, and call it a celebration of my 7 decades on this earth. Not in the home I built. Not in the life I curated. That mansion was my crown jewel, my masterpiece of quiet rebellion against a world that often overlooks women of a certain age. I chose every light fixture, commissioning the grand chandelier in the foyer from an artisan in Venice. I debated for weeks over the specific shade of ivory for the crown molding. I planted those delicate cherry blossom trees in the front myself, back when my hands didn't ache with a low, persistent thrum in the morning. I remember the night Charles and I first moved in 40 years ago. The cavernous rooms were empty, our voices echoing against the bare plaster walls. We had no furniture yet, just moving blankets spread on the hardwood floors and takeout containers from the Chinese place down the road. I thought back then, giddy on cheap wine and the intoxicating scent of our future, that we'd grow old here, that our ghosts would one day hold hands and wander these halls together. I didn't know that one day I'd be standing in this same living room, wearing custom-made gold earrings and a wine-colored silk dress, watching my husband serve me divorce papers before I even had a chance to cut my own birthday cake. The party had just hit its stride, the atmosphere humming with warmth and expensive champagne. My goddaughter Tina, a force of nature packed into a sharp attorney's suit, had flown in from Houston and was holding court by the fireplace, her laughter a delight. Charles's son from his first marriage, Marlon, my stepson on paper but my own true son in every way that mattered, stood beside me, a protective hand on my elbow, his plate piled high with the barbecue shrimp he'd loved since he was a boy. Laughter and the smooth melody of a live jazz trio echoed from the back patio. Even Sierra was there. Sierra Wynn, 29 years old, a yoga instructor turned wellness influencer, my husband's cliched midlife, or rather twilight years, crisis made flesh. She floated around the punch bowl in a white cocktail dress that was a size too small and a shade too bridal, taking endless selfies, her lips permanently pursed in a calculated pout. She pretended she belonged, angling her phone to catch the reflection of my Degas sculpture in the background. I had explicitly asked Charles not to bring her. "It's my 70th, Charles," I'd said calmly a week prior. "It's a family celebration. It would be inappropriate." He'd waved away my concerns with a new, infuriating condescension he'd adopted since she came into his life. "Ruth, don't be so provincial," he chided. "Sierra is important to me now. She deserves to be present for significant family moments." I should have known then what he was planning. He made his move mid-toast. Right after I had raised my glass, my heart genuinely full, and thanked my cherished friends and family for celebrating this milestone with me. Right after I looked around that magnificent room at the life we had built and told them that this home, this family meant everything to me. That's when Charles, my husband of 40 years, clinked his glass with a fork, a vulgar, attention-grabbing sound. He stepped forward, his face flushed with champagne and a strange, triumphant cruelty. "Ruth," he announced, his voice booming with false sincerity, "you've always had a way with words. But today, for once, I've got something to say." From the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket, he pulled a thick, legal-sized envelope. He didn't walk it over to me. He handed it to a passing waiter who, bewildered, placed it on his silver tray and presented it to me as if it were a rare delicacy. I didn't take it. I just stared at it. Tina, my goddaughter, ever the lawyer, stepped forward, intercepted the envelope from the poor, mortified waiter, glanced at the return address, a law firm I didn't recognize, and then looked at me, her face tightening into a protective knot. The jazz trio faltered, then fell silent. Everyone went quiet. "I'm filing for divorce," Charles announced into the suffocating silence, his tone as casual as if he were reading weather updates. "It's time for me to start a new chapter. Sierra and I are getting married next month. We hope you'll all support us in our new journey of love." A few gasps, like startled birds taking flight, fluttered from the guests. Sierra, in a practiced move, tucked herself under his arm like a triumphant puppy, her bright white teeth gleaming in the soft light. "He's my miracle man," she chirped, her voice piercing the stunned quiet. "So full of life. So generous." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I certainly didn't throw my champagne, though the thought was momentarily delicious. My training, my years of planning events, of managing crises with a calm, unruffled exterior took over. I simply reached for the heavy silk shawl draped over my chair, wrapped it around my shoulders and excused myself to the kitchen, my back ramrod straight. The crowd tried to act normal after that, a forced, brittle cheerfulness returning, but you could feel the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. Marlon followed me, his face a thundercloud of rage. "Ruth, say the word and I will throw him out of your house myself." I placed a calming hand on his arm. "Not now, my love," I told him. "I'm fine." I was not fine, but I was calm. A cold, clarifying calm that was beginning to feel like power. That night, after the last guest had fled my funereal birthday party, after Charles had the audacity to retreat to the guest bedroom with Sierra trailing behind him like a cloud of cloying perfume, I heard their voices drift up from the cracked door of the guest room below. "I want fresh orchids flown in from Hawaii," Sierra's high, girlish voice declared. "This is my bridal home. It has to be magazine-ready for the feature article." Charles chuckled, his voice thick with indulgence. "Whatever you want, baby. This place is yours now. Here's now." The words weren't just arrogant. They were a claim of ownership. They were actively, joyfully erasing me. The grief in my heart was instantly cauterized by a cold, white-hot rage. My composure was no longer about enduring pain. It was about preparing for battle. He thought this place, my home, was his to give away. He was about to be reminded, in the most public and financially painful way possible, who truly held the power. I walked directly to my bedroom closet, my steps silent and purposeful on the thick Persian rug. My fingers found the hidden panel behind the shoe racks. I pulled out the small gray lockbox I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the mundane documents of a life. Birth certificates, old passports, family photos. And one document that made my hand stop shaking the moment I saw it. The deed. Unencumbered, clear, and still bearing only one name as the sole proprietor. The date on it was April 23, 1997. I remembered that year like it was yesterday. The year Charles, in a fit of arrogant overconfidence, had made a reckless business decision, betting our entire savings on a luxury car dealership that imploded in less than 2 years, nearly taking our house with it. He had come to me, broken and terrified, begging me to use my own inheritance from my parents to settle the debt and save our home. I had agreed, but on the strict advice of my then-young goddaughter Tina, we filed a postnuptial agreement. The house reverted solely to me, my name alone on the title, to protect it from any of his future financial follies. We never changed it back. He had forgotten, or more likely, he had assumed it was a meaningless legal footnote, easily erased by 40 years of marriage and my supposed love for him. He was wrong. I sat down at my antique writing desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of heavy cream stationery. I wrote one line and underlined it twice. "He thinks I'm leaving." Then I picked up the phone and called Tina. "Tina, my love," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the night air. "It's time to open the war chest. I want you to draw up the auction papers. Immediately." The days following my disastrous 70th birthday party were a masterclass in quiet observation and controlled fury. Charles, my husband of 4 decades, clearly expected me to dissolve into a puddle of quiet, heartbroken tears, pack my sensible suitcases, and retreat to my sister's place in the countryside to live out my days in quiet disgrace. He seemed genuinely surprised each morning to find me still there, a silent, watchful ghost in the opulent hallways of my own home. He clearly mistook my cold composure for defeated resignation, my continued presence for a lack of options. It was a grave miscalculation, one of many he was about to regret. I did not leave. I stayed. I watched him and Sierra treat my house as their personal playground, their wedding launchpad. The mansion became their kingdom and I, its spectral, deposed queen. On Monday morning, without so much as a word to me, a team of decorators I'd never seen before arrived, their arms laden with enormous binders of fabric swatches and paint charts in 50 shades of what Sierra breathlessly called greige. Sierra, playing the grand lady, directed them with imperious flicks of her wrist, her voice echoing in the grand salon with pronouncements about clean lines and a more modern minimalist aesthetic. She pointed to my cherished mahogany sideboard, a magnificent piece that had belonged to my grandmother, its wood glowing with the patina of a century of care. "That has to go," she declared, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "It's so dark, so heavy. It's sucking all the positive energy out of the room." I watched from the doorway, sipping my tea, my face a polite, unreadable mask, and committed every condescending word, every dismissive gesture, to memory. Each one was another piece of evidence, another log on the pyre I was quietly building. The next day brought the ultimate violation. The head housekeeper, a kind, loyal woman named Maria who had been with me for 15 years, came to me in the library, her face pale with distress. "Mrs. Ellington," she began, her voice a low, apologetic whisper, twisting her hands in her apron. "Miss Wynne, she has instructed me to move your personal belongings from the master suite into the guest wing. The blue room. The blue room was lovely, of course, but it was for guests. The master suite was mine, was ours, the heart of the home. She says it's her room now, and she needs the space for her meditation altar and her walk-in closet redesign." "Thank you for informing me, Maria," I said, my voice preternaturally even, though my heart felt as if it were being squeezed in a vice. "Please do as she asks. Do not argue with her. It's quite all right." Maria looked at me, her eyes full of confusion and a fierce, helpless sympathy, but she nodded and retreated. I stood there for a long time, staring out at the cherry blossoms, picturing Sierra's tacky yoga mats and influencer gear defiling the room I had shared with Charles for 40 years, the room where I had nursed him through pneumonia, the room where we had celebrated our triumphs and weathered our sorrows. The anger in my chest was a cold, hard knot. This was no longer just disrespect. This was a hostile takeover, an erasure of my history. That afternoon, I met my goddaughter Tina for lunch at a discreet restaurant far from the house. She didn't knock when she arrived, but came in like she always did, a whirlwind of purpose, holding a manila folder close to her chest. "Tell me you still have it," she whispered as she sat down, her eyes intense. Without a word, I slid the original deed across the table. She flipped through the pages, her lips moving silently as she read. Then she looked up, a sharp, predatory smile spreading across her face, a smile I was very, very glad was on my side. "Ruth," she said, her voice low and thrilling, "you own this place outright. Free and clear. No lien. No mortgage. No shared interest. And thanks to that postnup, his name is nowhere near this title. No one can touch it." She tapped the page with a manicured finger. "He served you divorce papers, yes. An act of supreme arrogance and stupidity. But until that divorce is finalized by a judge, which will take months, if not longer given how much we are about to contest, the property is yours to manage, to leverage, to sell as you see fit. He has made a catastrophic, arrogant error." I leaned back in my chair, the first genuine tendril of relief uncurling within me. "And the marital assets?" I asked, sipping my tea. "The furniture, the art he thinks he's entitled to? That's more complicated," she admitted. "Anything acquired during the marriage is technically marital property to be divided. But his behavior, Ruth, serving you at your own party, the public humiliation, his clear intent to install his mistress in your home while you are still a resident. A sympathetic judge would look very kindly on a motion to secure those assets from being disposed of by him or his new partner." She opened her own folder. "And I've already drafted the motion just in case." A week later, Sierra threw a lavish bridal shower for herself in my garden. My roses, the ones I had painstakingly cultivated for years, the ones named after my own mother, were used as a backdrop for her endless selfies with her equally vapid friends. I was not invited. I spent the afternoon in my new room in the guest wing, the windows open, listening to their shrill laughter and the constant pop of champagne corks, the sounds a constant, grating reminder of my status as an exile in my own home. While they partied, I was making my own plans. Tina had the auction listing prepared, the photography scheduled, everything ready to go live on my signal. Meanwhile, on Tina's advice, I had spent 2 quiet afternoons visiting a stunning, newly constructed penthouse apartment overlooking the lake, a listing so new it wasn't yet on the public market. With Tina's help, using a holding trust to ensure absolute privacy, I'd put down a significant non-refundable deposit, paid for with my own retirement funds. Funds derived from the returns on the very investments Charles had once sneered at as my little hobby. The irony was delicious. Tina and I set the date for the auction. We chose a Saturday, the morning after Charles and Sierra's rehearsal dinner, a time we knew they would be exhausted, hungover, their guards down, utterly unprepared for the storm that was about to break. My silence, my apparent compliance, had lulled them into a state of supreme, foolish confidence. They were busy planning a wedding. I was methodically planning an eviction. That night, as I walked past the guest room where Charles and Sierra now slept, the door was cracked open. Sierra was in a new silk robe, posing in front of my antique full-length mirror. "Do you think this would look good for my brand reel?" she asked Charles, striking a pose. "I want something that screams wealth, you know? Opulence." Charles chuckled, the sound thick and indulgent. "Whatever you want, baby. This place is yours now. It will all be yours." I kept walking, my hand gliding silently over the cool wood of the stair rail. But for the first time in days I felt something almost like peace. A warrior's peace. Because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't going to fight their petty battles over backsplashes and brand reels. I was going to watch them lose the war. The final week before their wedding was a masterclass in self-control, a performance worthy of the stage. I moved through my own home like a polite, deferential ghost, my presence so quiet and unassuming that I think Charles and Sierra began to forget I was there at all, beyond my function as a silent, accommodating fixture. I nodded quietly as Sierra pointed out walls she intended to demolish, her hand slicing through the air with a casual violence. I murmured non-committally as she showed me fabric swatches for drapes that would replace the heavy, embroidered silk my mother had helped me choose decades ago. My compliance seemed to fuel her arrogance, and Charles, observing my placid demeanor, seemed to relax completely, convinced I was a defeated woman. The final, most egregious violation came on the Tuesday before the wedding. I returned home from a quiet walk through the park to find my art studio, my sanctuary on the 3rd floor where I painted and sketched, completely cleared out. My French easel, a gift from my late father, was folded unceremoniously in a corner. My canvases, some holding half-finished works, were stacked against a wall, covered in a dusty sheet. In their place, a chaotic jumble of gleaming chrome tripods, soft box lights on spindly legs, and dozens of cardboard boxes spewing brightly colored athleisure littered every surface. Sierra's influencer gear. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed when I stood in the doorway, my face a carefully blank canvas. "Oh, Ruth," she'd said, barely looking up from her phone where she was furiously tapping away. "I just needed a space with better natural light for my content creation. You weren't really using this old room, were you? It's going to be my new media hub. Much better use of the square footage, don't you think?" Later that evening, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I watched a bit of her Instagram livestream from the doorway of my guest wing room. Her audience of followers was a concept I found both baffling and pathetic. A sea of anonymous hearts and fleeting comments. She panned her phone around my desecrated studio, now her media hub. "Manifesting my best life in our forever home," she declared, her voice a saccharine squeal that grated on my nerves. "My soulmate, Charles, and I believe that true abundance comes from clearing out the old, stagnant energy to make way for the new. So excited to show you all the amazing changes we have planned." Charles walked in behind her then, drawn by the sound of her voice, oblivious to my presence in the darkened hallway. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "We deserve this, baby," he'd said, kissing the top of her head. "All of it." Their audacity was no longer just insulting. It was clarifying. They saw me, my history, my passions, my very presence as stagnant energy to be cleared away. That night, sitting in Tina's quiet, elegant office on the 20th floor, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, I felt a profound and liberating peace. The last vestiges of doubt, of sentimental attachment to the physical house that had become my prison, vanished. "Are you absolutely sure, Ruth?" Tina asked, her pen hovering over the final document, her lawyerly duty compelling her to ask one last time. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Tina, I replied, my voice steady. I signed the final paperwork for the penthouse purchase. The transaction was secured with a bridge loan against the guaranteed equity from the house auction and my own carefully guarded retirement funds. It was mine. Then I signed the auction authorization contract. The trap was officially set. The rehearsal dinner was, I heard from Marlon, a lavish affair at the city's most exclusive country club. Charles and Sierra were the toast of the evening, surrounded by her wealthy family and their coterie of fawning friends. Marlon told me his father had made a speech, thanking Sierra's parents for welcoming him into their wonderful family, with not a single mention of his mother, the woman whose home they were all set to return to that night. While they toasted to their perfect future and their forever home, a quiet, efficient moving company, vetted by Tina and sworn to absolute secrecy, arrived at 12 Chestnut Street. Under my calm, watchful supervision, my most cherished belongings, my art, my first editions, my grandmother's mahogany sideboard, my clothes, my personal papers, and yes, the heavy silk drapes Sierra had so casually discarded, were carefully packed and transported to my new serene penthouse overlooking the lake. The movers were gone by midnight, leaving the mansion looking untouched from the outside, but now hollowed out of its soul, its true history. I spent my last night there in my temporary room in the guest wing, the house feeling strangely, wonderfully quiet, a beautiful empty shell waiting for its next act. I felt a pang of sadness not for the house itself, but for the 40 years of love and laughter that had been so easily devalued by the man who had shared them with me. But the sadness was overshadowed by a cold, thrilling sense of impending justice. At precisely 2 a.m., as I knew Charles and Sierra would be sleeping off their champagne-fueled self-congratulations, their minds filled with visions of tomorrow's wedding, I sent Tina a one-word text message, now. Minutes later she confirmed. The auction listing for 12 Chestnut Street was live. It appeared on every major luxury real estate website. A stunning digital brochure featuring professional exterior photographs, a detailed floor plan, and the legally verified documentation of ownership. The heading was stark, professional, and utterly devastating. Iconic Lakeview Mansion. Urgent auction sale by sole owner. Bids close in 24 hours. Immediate transfer of ownership. In bold, impossible to miss letters. I imagined the phones of real estate brokers and wealthy investors across the city beginning to buzz with alerts. I imagined the digital shockwaves already starting to ripple outwards. Charles and Sierra were dreaming of their wedding day, of their future in their forever home. They had no idea that when they woke up, their dream would have already become a public spectacle, a bidding war for the very foundation they thought was so securely theirs. By the time the wedding cake was to be cut, I would already have the keys to a new kingdom, one built not on betrayal but on my own unyielding strength. The first sign of the implosion came not as a roar, but as the insistent, intrusive flash of a professional camera from the street below my new penthouse window. I was already awake, of course. Sleep had been a brief, shallow affair. I sat in a plush armchair, a cup of freshly brewed coffee in my hand, watching the sunrise paint the lake in delicate hues of rose and gold. The silence was magnificent, a stark contrast to the performative noise that had filled my old home. The view from this height was breathtaking, a sprawling vista of the city I had known my whole life, now seen from a new, elevated perspective. But my mind was miles away on Chestnut Street. Marlon, my dear loyal Marlon, had called me just after dawn, his voice a tight wire of confusion and dawning awe. Ruth, what in the world is going on? My phone is blowing up. I've had calls from the Chronicle from 2 real estate bloggers. They're all asking about an urgent auction for the house. They're saying it's listed as a 24-hour sale. I'll explain everything later, my love, I told him calmly, my voice steady. For now, just know that I am safe, that I am well, and that a long overdue market correction is in progress. I heard him let out a slow whistle on the other end of the line. He understood. I could only imagine the scene at the mansion, and my imagination, I admit, was quite vivid. Charles, waking up late, a dull champagne headache pounding behind his eyes, would be reaching for Sierra, dreaming of the perfect wedding day ahead. The first unwelcome sound would be the insistent ringing of his phone. Annoyed, he would answer, expecting well wishes from a guest. Instead, it would be his lawyer, his voice sharp with panic. Charles, what the hell is going on? Why is your house all over the luxury real estate sites, listed for immediate auction? Confused, Charles would stumble to the window, his mind still foggy, and see them. A news van from the local TV station parked across the street, photographers with long-lensed cameras on the public sidewalk, a small but growing crowd of curious, wealthy neighbors gathering, their faces a mixture of confusion and greedy speculation. He would have been confused, then annoyed, then as the reality began to sink in, a cold, sickening dread would have taken hold. His phone would have started ringing off the hook then. His business partners, his golfing buddies, the best man, all asking the same bewildered question. Charles, are you bankrupt? Is this a joke? Why is your house up for auction on your wedding day? Sierra's screams would have been the next part of the symphony. I could picture her, her face a mask of rage and disbelief, her perfect bridal preparations. The hairstylist, the makeup artist already scheduled, completely forgotten. She wouldn't be on the phone with her wedding planner. She'd be on the phone with her florist, her caterer, her society friends, all of them having seen the news alerts on their phones. Put it on hold? What do you mean the venue isn't secure? I could almost hear her screeching, her carefully constructed brand of manifested abundance, crumbling into a very public, very viral humiliation. They were trapped. Their forever home was now a fishbowl, its impending sale the talk of the town, the juiciest scandal to hit our social circle in years. They were no longer the power couple celebrating their union. They were a spectacle of domestic and financial implosion. Then came the definitive legal blow. Tina called me around 10 a.m., her voice crisp with professional satisfaction. He tried, Ruth, she said. He tried everything. Charles rushed to his lawyer's office, still in his dressing gown, I'm told, and they attempted to file an emergency injunction, a temporary restraining order to block the sale. Their claim? That you were mentally incompetent, acting erratically out of jealous spite. My heart gave a small, cold flutter, a residual fear of his power, but I trusted Tina completely. And, Tina said, a triumphant smile in her voice, I was already at the courthouse, waiting for them in the judge's chambers. I had anticipated this move. I presented Judge Miller with the signed postnuptial agreement from 1997, the original deed in your name only, your pristine financial statements, and a detailed affidavit outlining his recent behavior, including serving you divorce papers at your own birthday party and the subsequent takeover of your home. Tina paused for effect. The judge, a woman I know to have very little patience for entitled, bullying men, took about 5 minutes to review it. Another pause. She denied his motion. Emphatically. Her exact words were, "This motion is frivolous, vexatious, and frankly insulting to my intelligence, counselor." In layman's terms, Ruth? She told him it was too little, far too late. The sale proceeds unencumbered. A single, cleansing tear traced a path down my cheek. It was truly done. He had no legal recourse. The house was mine to sell, and sell it I would. At that very same hour, as Charles was likely absorbing the shock of his swift and public legal defeat, the front door to my penthouse swung open. Marlon entered, his arms full of the last box from my old study, his face a mixture of awe at my new surroundings and a fierce, protective loyalty that warmed my heart. "Ruth," he said, setting the box down. "You are absolutely incredible." He helped me unpack the last of my things. My art supplies, my favorite books, the small framed photo of my husband and me on our wedding day a lifetime ago. I placed it on the gleaming mantelpiece, the morning light glinting off the glass. Then I walked over to the dining table and placed a small, elegant vase of fresh white orchids in its center, the very flowers Sierra had declared funereal and dreadful just weeks ago. In my new home, they looked like symbols of peace, of a clean, serene new beginning. Marlon, following my gaze, understood completely. He found the box containing Sierra's discarded drapes, the ones she'd had taken down from my old living room windows because their history represented stagnant energy. They were beautiful hand-embroidered silk. He held them up against the vast sunlit windows of my new living room. "They'd look perfect here, Ruth," he said softly, and so we hung them. Sierra's cast-offs, her symbols of stagnant energy, now framed my magnificent new view of the lake, a quiet, final, delicious irony. The house on Chestnut Street was no longer theirs to claim. Legally it never was. And I, the woman he thought he could discard, was already home. The online auction was a spectacle, a masterclass in public humiliation orchestrated from the serene comfort of my penthouse balcony. With Marlon beside me, a sleek laptop open on the small glass table between us, I sipped my favorite Earl Grey tea and watched the frantic digital dismantling of Charles's carefully constructed world. The real estate website featured a live bidding tracker, a relentless, ascending tally of numbers that represented his arrogance being monetized, his future being sold off to the highest bidder in real time. It was the most satisfying financial report I had ever read. The morning had been a chaotic symphony of his downfall. The local news had picked up the story, running a segment with aerial shots of the mansion under the headline, "Tycoon's Wedding Day Woes. Storied Ellington Mansion in Shock 24-Hour Auction." News of Judge Miller's denial of his injunction had spread like wildfire through the legal and business communities. The story was irresistible. The aging, image-obsessed tycoon, the much younger influencer bride, and the scorned first wife with an ironclad postnup and a will of steel. My name, Ruth Ellington, was being whispered in boardrooms and at country clubs with a mixture of awe and respect, while Charles's was being dragged through the mud of public opinion as a fool who had catastrophically underestimated his wife. Sierra predictably had a complete and utter meltdown. Not in private, of course. Her entire existence was a performance, and her humiliation was no different. She went live on Instagram from the manicured back garden of my old house, her face tear-streaked, her mascara running, her voice a raw shriek of fury and victimhood. "She's a monster. A bitter, jealous old hag," she wailed to her thousands of followers, her phone shaking in her hand as she paced the very flagstones I had chosen. "She ruined everything. My wedding. My brand. I had 10,000 followers waiting on our mansion tour. This was supposed to be my big launch. She's trying to destroy me because she can't stand to see Charles happy." Her performance went viral for all the wrong reasons. The comment section was a digital bloodbath of public opinion, overwhelmingly on my side. "Lady, he served her divorce papers at her 70th birthday party. You're not the victim here. That old hag legally owns the house you're having a tantrum in. Honey, your brand is now gold-digging homewrecker. Good luck with that." Her influencer career was immolating in real time, a spectacular bonfire of her own making, and I watched with a grim, detached fascination. Marlon, watching the auction with a satisfying smirk, decided to add a little salt to the wound. "Out of loyalty, Ruth," he said with a wink, "and just for a bit of sport." He created an anonymous bidding account under a corporate holding name, and at a crucial moment when the bidding seemed to be slowing, he placed a significant fake bid, driving the price up by another $100,000. The move, as he'd predicted, triggered a renewed frenzy among the two most serious bidders, who now saw a new, powerful competitor in the mix. The price soared. The final gavel, so to speak, fell just after noon. A discreet timer on the website counted down to 0. The mansion, my home of 40 years, the foundation of Charles's world, sold for a staggering $4.2 million. The transfer of funds was already in motion, handled with ruthless efficiency by Tina and her team. My own exit from the house had been quiet, but I had left one final personal touch. Before the movers arrived for my belongings, I had taken a small hand-carved wooden box, a simple anniversary gift Charles had made for me in the early, happier days of our marriage when his hands were still more familiar with tools than with stock portfolios. It was a small thing of no monetary value, something he had likely long forgotten. I placed it on the center of the grand foyer mantelpiece, a place no one could miss. Inside there was no jewelry, no sentimental keepsake. Just a single folded note. It read, "You forgot what we built." I didn't. The aftermath for Charles was swift and brutal. The eviction notice, a standard clause in such a high-stakes, immediate transfer auction, gave him and his non-bride 24 hours to vacate the premises. I imagined the frantic, humiliating scramble to pack up his life, his dreams, his expensive suits and Sierra's endless boxes of influencer gear, under the watchful eyes of the new owner's representatives. And then the final delicious insult. Marlon forwarded me an email from a frantic wedding guest. The catering company that had supplied Sierra's lavish, unattended by-me bridal shower had sent their final, very large and now very overdue invoice to the house. With Charles's assets now likely frozen pending the divorce proceedings I was about to formally continue, and with no bride to foot the bill, It remained, as far as I knew, unpaid. A fittingly tacky end to their short-lived, grasping reign. From my balcony, sipping my tea, the city looked beautiful, serene. The air was clean. And I was, for the first time in a very long time, truly, profoundly at peace. The days after the auction were a quiet unfolding of my victory, a meticulous reordering of my world on my own terms. The first thing I did was take the unsigned divorce papers Charles had so theatrically served me at my 70th birthday party, and with a deep, satisfying sense of closure, I tore them neatly in half and let the pieces flutter into my elegant new recycling bin. I had no intention of divorcing him now. Why would I? Let him remain tethered to me in legal limbo, the woman who held all the cards, the woman who had so comprehensively outmaneuvered him. Tina McCall confirmed the legal situation with a triumphant smile during our next lunch. The marriage was never officially dissolved by a court, Ruth. The house was sold, the money is yours. The community property laws will apply to other assets acquired during the marriage, of course, but the biggest piece, the mansion, was and always had been since 1997 your separate property protected by that ironclad postnup. His attempt to force you into a quick divorce to get his hands on it backfired spectacularly. Now any divorce, any settlement will be on your timeline and on your terms. And I must say, she added, raising her glass of iced tea, your terms are likely to be rather stringent. Sierra Wynne vanished as quickly as she had appeared, a puff of perfumed smoke. Her influencer accounts went dark, her brand utterly destroyed by her own viral meltdown. With no mansion, no wedding, no access to Charles's now drastically reduced funds, she had no more use for her miracle man. There was no prenuptial agreement because there had been no nuptials. She left, I heard through the grapevine, with her yoga mats, her ring lights, and her shattered dreams of social media stardom, likely already on the hunt for her next wealthy patron. Charles was alone. He tried to call, of course. It began with a barrage of furious, sputtering texts filled with disbelief and threats of legal action. When I didn't reply, the tone shifted. The voicemails started, left from unknown numbers, his arrogance dissolving into a pathetic, pleading whimper. Ruth, we need to talk. Please. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I wasn't thinking. She got in my head. Please just call me. I deleted each message without a flicker of remorse. Instead, I took a piece of my new elegant stationery, the kind with my initial, R, embossed in a subtle, tasteful gold at the top, and wrote a short, simple note. I sent it via courier to the downmarket business hotel where I'd heard he was temporarily staying, a place with polyester bedspreads and a view of a parking garage. The note read, I don't answer to guests. That was the last communication I intended to have with him for a very long time. My life now was about building anew, about filling my beautiful new space with peace, with art, with the people I truly loved. The penthouse, once a sterile, empty space, began to feel like home. Marlon, my true son in every way that mattered, helped me arrange my books in the new library, his presence a warm, steady comfort. He was the one who, on the first evening I spent there, hung a portrait above the modern, minimalist mantelpiece. It wasn't a grand oil-painted thing, but a simple, beautifully framed photograph he'd taken of me years ago in my garden on Chestnut Street. In it, I was wearing my favorite wide-brimmed garden hat, my face turned towards the sun, my hands happily covered in soil, standing tall and proud in front of the very house I no longer needed, the house that had been the stage for both my greatest joys and my deepest sorrows. As I settled into my reading nook that evening, a cup of herbal tea in my hands, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. Charles had seen my age, my quiet nature, my long-standing loyalty as weaknesses to be exploited, as things to be discarded. He thought that by bringing in a younger, flashier model he could simply render me obsolete, a relic from a bygone era. He thought my age made me expendable. I looked at the portrait of me in my garden, then around at my beautiful new home, a home built not on a shared past rife with betrayal, but on my own singular, resilient strength. The foundation of his world had been built on my love, my support, my assets. When he tried to knock me out from under it, he discovered, to his ruin, that I was the foundation all along. And I was and always had been solid as a rock.